Hello and welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. My name is David Osamede, your host. And on this podcast, we're talking to accomplished professionals and entrepreneurs across the country. We're learning about what keeps them passionate, what keeps them going. And we're talking about a lot of the lessons learned along the way. Now, I'm here with a good friend, someone I have huge respect for, seriously accomplished, Osamede. I will have him introduce himself here. Osamede, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Osamede Arunde, and simply I'm an investor and an educator. So that's it.
That's awesome, man. Just a little humble there. You got a lot of stuff going in the background, but we'll dive into all of those things. And the first thing I want to start out also, Mayday, is to talk about your journey into entrepreneurship. Now, of course, you've done a lot of cool stuff from content creation to the businesses you're involved in, and you've also been involved in many things in the past. But what really got you into this whole entrepreneurship thing in the first place?
You know what? Honestly, I still think about that question till today. I, as far back as I can remember, I've always loved the idea of value creation. I've always loved the idea of, bringing value to the marketplace, of connecting demand to supply. I've always loved the idea of bringing solution as far back as I can remember, right? I mean, in high school, I used to be that guy. I think now they will call it the plug. Like, I used to be that guy where if you needed something, you go to, I'll figure it out. Like my brain thrives off of problem solving. Like I see a problem, my brain starts to think about solution. It's nonstop. And I started just try to figure it out. It was just something I just enjoyed doing. Back then, I grew up in Nigeria. Back then, entrepreneurship as a word or as a career wasn't big. As a matter of fact, no one talked about it, right? You had to be a doctor, an engineer. And I get the concept of it. It was really came from a place of love because everyone wanted to see you do well. So I never really thought about, creating a career out of entrepreneurship. I just knew I was good at it. I was good at, finding problems in the world, finding solutions or connecting the solutions to the world. And that's where it started for me. But I think things changed when I moved to Canada in 2006. And I say things change because remember, like I said, I've always just been in the business world. I've always just, did things like procurement subconsciously. I've always just did things like consulting subconsciously, right? But when I came to Canada was when I met a lady by the name of Dove Brown. And she was the one that helped me understand that, you see, there is a system to success. There is a system to creating the life you want. There is a system that I wasn't just crazy, right? And then she really emphasized her point by introducing me to books, introducing me to mentors through books, introducing me to people who had lived the life I wanted to live, people who had taught the same way I taught. So the first book she ever gave me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And then she gave me Richest Man in Babylon, then Think and Grow Rich. She gave me the first dozen or so books I ever read when it came to personal growth and when it came to business. And now not understanding personal growth or learning about personal growth really started to bring that whole business notion for me and put it into shape and put it into perspective and gave me the confidence and the strength that I really needed to say, you know what, I'm going to build a life around this. I'm going to build a career around this. It might not be cool. It might not be something that's common from where I'm from, but I trust myself enough to take a chance on me, right? So I guess That's why.
Yeah, of course. Fascinating. And, as you were talking about your response, I was kind of thinking, when did I actually first heard of the term entrepreneurship? And you and I, we come from Nigeria. I think it was in my economics class in high school. And they were talking about the forms of production, right? The capital, labor. And there's this weird word, entrepreneurship. And I always thought, what's that mean? But, look at how far we've come from those days of not really understanding entrepreneurship as what we think it is now. But also some things I picked up from your answer, Samedi, which I think is very, very important. And I think one of the core signs of you being an entrepreneur or having that mindset is the love for problems. Because to me, when a problem comes, I'm like, this is sweet. Like, this is awesome. An opportunity for me to go research, to throw myself into something, to kind of invest my time. And of course, the reward is finding a solution, digging through things, figuring things out. And for me, I think that is really, really crucial. And nothing that I particularly like in your answer, Samede, is the role of reading, because because those books you mentioned, I've read them as well, and mind changing. I think my very first book as well was Think and Grow Rich by
Wow.
Napoleon Hill, and I
Nice,
think
nice.
that there's a movie being done of that
Yes,
now.
that's what I'm.
Um, and I think, reading is really the way to broaden and expand your mind, to seek knowledge from experts who've walked the journey of what you're trying to accomplish. And reading is almost like a shortcut, almost to get to wherever you want to get to.
Absolutely.
Now, to segue into reading, you've published a book called Higher Education. And I think in this book, you really try to demystify the process of, growing beyond the current system as we know it, the education system. Can you just unpack for me some of the concepts behind that book? What inspired you to write that book, and what you hope people took out of that book you wrote?
I think it was exactly what you just talked about. For me, it was my journey, right? I met a mentor one time, and he used to always say the formula for life is study, practice, and teach, right? For me, like I said, I came into the world of personal growth for the first time in 2006, and it changed my life. And I couldn't believe that it was real, that like people would just live life by chance when there was actually a system for success, when there was actually a system of how to think, when there was actually a system to get, as cliche as it sounds, get everything that you want out of life. So for me, when I felt like I discovered this thing, it's the same way Earl Nightingale would say the greatest secret, right? Where it says it's not really a secret, but it's a secret because not many people know about it, right? So it becomes a secret when it's really not. And it was the same idea for me. It was like, wow, personal growth was for me, it was what changed it all. It was the path that took me to understanding that indeed, as a man think he is, and indeed you can truly, get everything that you want in life, right? If you help enough people get what they want, but all of those becomes arbitrary. The point is you can get everything that you want in life. There is a system to it. And I wanted to document my process. That was really it. It was the idea of how, so essentially what you said, like, right, I went to high school, went to university, I have a degree, I'm smart, right? But I realized that there is the standard education that, the world teaches you, that you go, there's a standard education. But I realized that there is a higher education. Even, when you go to church or whatever it is, from a spiritual perspective, you learn also that there is a higher perspective. There is a 30,000-foot view of the world and how things work. So I wanted to document my own experience in what this higher education meant for me. This place where it's one thing to learn, work, is how Jim Rohn would say, if you work hard on yourself, you make a living, but you could also earn a fortune. If you work hard on your job, you make a living. If you work hard on yourself, you could earn a fortune. And that was it for me. So again, I wanted to document what I had learned throughout, my journey on personal growth, document it for myself, but also to show people that, look, there is the standard way of living, there's the standard education, but there is a higher way to approach life. And this higher way to approach life can truly help you be all that you want to be, or all that you could be, right? It's a way of life that unlocks potential. And the question is always, what is the step-by-step way? And that's what the book is all about, right? It's understanding personal growth, understanding how you yourself can start to unlock some of these hidden genius, hidden abilities that's in you, naturally, how you can start unlocking them to truly get to a higher life, the extraordinary life. That was what it's all about. So that's what I really hope that people get from reading the book.
Amazing. That's very, very insightful, Osamede. And I definitely agree with you. A lot of people, coast through life and life happens to them. They don't grab life by the bullhorns and say, this is what I want out of life and go make it happen. And like you said, it's a secret because even though technically information is not the problem, we're at the age of the internet, you could literally read a whole bunch of articles, but not everyone is taking advantage of that. But let's unpack a little bit what those secrets are, what those steps are. So if I'm somebody and I'm just listening to you and I'm saying, wow, Osamede is very inspiring and like that approach to life, what should be your very first step if you really want to start working on yourself in terms of personal growth, development? And of course, a lot of people say it's all woo woo and it's just like being out there. But in terms of practical first steps, what would you recommend for someone who wants to start working on themselves right now?
Okay, so first of all, I think that I'm not going to give too much because the book is out there. Go read it. but
Of course.
but the point I'm really trying to make is, a mentor of mine used to say, you have to make a study of whatever it is you want. If you want to be successful, study success. If you want to be healthy, study health. If you want to live a life in terms of fulfilling your dreams and aspirations, you have to study those who have done it. So talking about the book and talking about first step, I've come to realize that the first step really is studying yourself and studying life. And the idea, and again, it gets a little bit more complex. Why do I say it gets a little bit more complex? Because it comes down to what you really believe, right? There's different school of thought. And I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong, right? Don't be a follower, be a student, make a study of. So listen to what I have to say, listen to what others have to say, and make your own decision, right? The reason why I say that is that if you believe you came from a monkey, right, there's not much I could say. There's not much I can, I mean, if you believe you came from a monkey, then you might have to study the monkeys and figure out, you know what I mean? Like, but if you believe that you came from a higher power that can create, then it might be worth studying to start to realize and ask yourself, who am I? And I think that that's the first step everyone has to ask, who am I?
So some level of self-awareness, right? And so for me, the way I approach personal growth, and I'm very curious about your thoughts on this, is I approach personal growth from a position of emotional mastery, right? So I believe that at the end of the day, for all of us humans, emotions is something that drives us, whether that's positive emotions, you have the drive to succeed, passion, or negative emotions, fear, anger, rage, all of that fun stuff. For me, I believe that the place where personal growth begins is when you start to understand what are the things that drives me, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And the self-awareness of all of these things means that number one, you know what's driving you. And number two, you can start to influence yourself so that you start to pick and select, okay, this is what I've been driving me. I want to replace that with this other emotion. And then I want to use that to guide me towards wherever goal I'm trying to go to.
I agree.
Yeah, in your thoughts, what is a place of awareness in really achieving that level of personal growth, that level of direction to success, and applying yourself to success you're talking about? What are your thoughts on emotional awareness?
So emotional awareness, I mean, if I just to put it in English, in my opinion, it's really just, it comes down to really studying yourself and saying, what motivates me, right? Who am I and why do I, you know how they say goals, dreams, aspirations are like magnets, right? And the more clearly they are defined, the more it attracts. For me, it comes down to saying why, like, okay, I want to be, whatever it is, whatever that goal is, it's why. What's the motive behind it, right? And I think that the more clearly we understand ourselves, the more clearly we understand our weaknesses, so we can, build bridges to fill that gap. The more we understand why we want to accomplish certain goals, we sort of find the strength, even when we might, naturally just feel like coasting, right? So that's sort of like my first approach is, really understanding yourself and understanding why it is what it is you want and why. Because I think that in terms of emotional strength, the more clearly you can define that why, the more easy it is for you to. It's almost like there is a price for every promise. And if the promise is clear, the price is easy.
Clarity on your promise helps you to know what price you have to pay to get it. I really like that. And I think you mentioned start with why. I've read the book by Simon Sinek, and I think having that why is very, very crucial. But let's kind of make a little bit of a pivot back to the entrepreneurship journey. So you were explaining earlier from high school, you were that guy who solves problem. How did it actually translate into your journey of success now? So from being that guy who solved problems, how did you move and grow yourself into being an entrepreneur today? What kind of steps did you took in your own entrepreneurship journey in terms of what you actually did?
I think for me, first step was dedication. And second step really was, so like I said, I moved to Canada in 2006, came here for university. I was going through university and I met a lady, Dove Brown. She introduced me to personal growth, to essentially say, hey, look, I hear you speak. I feel the passion in you, but it needs to be refined. Essentially, got introduced to personal growth, told you about the concept of study, practice, teach, make a study of things. I mean, I was going about my day to day, and I will typically just see problems in the marketplace. And for me, it was always just been solving it. So let's put it into perspective. My very first business was a business printing t-shirts. And it was simple. I traveled to Toronto, I believe, and I saw someone wearing a custom shirt. Oh, I saw a shop making custom shirts. I thought it was pretty cool. I put the lyrics of a song on the shirt. I was like, oh, this is cool. I came back to Winnipeg, and then someone saw the shirt on me, and they're like, oh, I really love that. And then I asked, I was like, well, if I like, would you buy it? Like, and because it was a friend of mine, I was like, yeah, he was like, yeah, I'll buy it. And I literally sold him my shirts. And then I knew, I was like, okay, there's a need for this thing. Right. And it was that time where Afrobeats was just, I mean, in the African was this is like, yeah, like I said, this was probably like 2008, maybe around. So the people were putting like lyrics on songs, there's a song like Ethereum, you go, there's no song like that. Everyone's having this shirt, Ethereum shirt, right? And I literally would just call up the guy in Toronto. I had to get a friend to go find the guy, whatever. Call up the guy like, hey, look, I'll send you an order. I'll send you the money. Could you print the shirt, send for me? And that's how it literally started. That was it. I was just the middleman. Did that for maybe a couple months. And then I just thought to myself, I'm like, look, and I see, man, you know how when they say, you ever done this exercise where they're like, okay, look around you for something red, right? And then they ask you how many things were yellow, and you're like, you can't find things that are yellow, but you found everything that was red. The idea where it's like, when you start focusing on a problem, or so you start to see it all around. I started to notice all of a sudden that it wasn't just the everyday people printing t-shirts. It was schools. It was weddings. Like, I was in university. I saw university groups doing it for fundraisers. I was like, holy smoke, this market is actually a big market. Started to watch YouTube videos on it, things like that. And I would just always play the middleman. Long story short, I met up with a friend, and I told him, I said, look, we can actually make this a business. It was about the same time I started learning about credit. And long story short, we actually decided, hey, we should invest in the machines that make them. And literally, I still remember, and my partner then would say to me, it's like, look, Osamede, if you say you could do this, like, I trust you enough to do that. You're the kind of guy that your brain will figure it out. That's how we got into the business. So we started off from just being brokers in the middle. Then we started manufacturing. And then I heard about this thing called mergers and acquisitions. I can't remember what, I probably saw it in the movie. I started reading about it online, started learning about it, like, just really and I'm that kind of guy. When I put my mind on something, I just go deep, like nonstop. So I learned about this thing called mergers and acquisition. So what had happened was that we were printing t-shirts in our house, like just in the basement, small batches. But at the same time, we started talking to schools, and we started talking to like faculties, because so high schools and in university, like our faculties, and we will get like bigger orders, but we couldn't do them by ourselves. So maybe like an order for like 1,000 shirts or whatever, 500 shirts. Then we started finding third parties who would do them for us. And that's how we made another business. So we had built a reputation with another business that did our bulk orders. And then I said to my friend, and I said, my partner, I said, look, you know what? I think we should buy over that business. And he first was like, you're crazy. like who's going to sell to these two young university students? Like, these guys had been in business for years, like over 10 years. And I was like, no, like, I've been reading about this thing, mergers. I could put together a pitch why it makes sense, because it did make sense, because we brought them a lot of large orders. They didn't really understand marketing. We understood marketing. We were essentially driving. I could tell that we're driving a lot of production for them, because they'll take us out, they'll tell us how much like our business means to them, and I was like, we should long story short, we actually did a merger with that company, and we actually took over that company.
Wow.
But again, that was also my biggest, I guess, failure and biggest lesson as well. So we did take over that company, we did a merger, but part of it was that after the merger, we got like, massive loans from the banks. They offered us money, pretty much, like lines of credit. And I got very excited. It's like, oh, free money, and we took a bunch of loans that we didn't need. And that essentially ended up over the years destroying that business, because what happened was that I ended up taking all these loans and putting it into parts of the businesses that we were essentially spending on our overhead. We got like did a bunch of renovations, hired a bunch of staff that we didn't have to. We were not investing in things that directly impacted sales. We're investing in everything else, make the business look good, So, and I think for me, it's like a learning point. And I remember, Jim Rohn used to say, when your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall.
Wow.
That's essentially what happened to us, right? It took a few years for it to play out, but when I look back, that was the mistake. I didn't understand overhead. So today, as a businessman, even when I look at other businesses that we invest in, I always look at overhead. What's your overhead like? What's your cash flow like? Because I have learned from personal experience that your overhead, if not controlled, can absolutely destroy your business. It happened to me when I first got. So that's pretty much where I started from. And then from there, like I said, I was very passionate about personal growth because that was what the difference was in my life. People started asking me, yo, how did you, you were a university student, you started a business, you actually bought over another business, we had a location downtown, 2 floors. It's like, how did you do that? And for me, it really started with personal growth. So I started sharing my story with the book. People started inviting me to come speak about personal growth. And then I started teaching courses online on personal growth. And we went from there to doing consultations for businesses. From there to actually today where I actually manage a fund. And what we do is invest into businesses. But I still love teaching. I think teaching for me is sort of like part of my core. So I still teach courses, especially when it comes to finance, helping people learn to create wealth, to grow wealth, to pass on to the next generation. That's something I sort of do in a way to give back. It sort of fuels me because of my person. But for business and for work, I run an investment fund now. And our job really is to find businesses that are shaping. Our focus really is around Africa. So we find businesses that are shaping Africa. And we also have a segment of our business that focuses on investing in blockchain technology companies. Again, we believe that blockchain technology companies are changing the world. So we're focused on essentially building business or investing in businesses that are going to shape the future of the world. So the future where my kids and your kids are going to grow up in. In the past 3 years, we've helped raise over $10 million for a lot of projects that we funded. So I guess that's my story.
Wow. That's a fascinating story, man. I really like the hustle. I from one hustler to the other. I appreciate your hustle. Actually, my story is somewhat similar, although not as impressive as yours. I moved to Canada with my family in 2012, and started studying computer science. I ended up finishing my computer science degree at the U of M, and then actually while I was in my second year of university, I started my first business, which was painting houses. So
okay, nice.
It was a very simple service. It made perfect sense. I hated painting, but for me, I just saw myself as a businessman who just happened to paint houses. So I had a bunch of university students like myself, put them to work, had some marketers, got them knocking on doors. And we did over $500,000 in revenue in a couple of months of running the business. So it was really, really fun and really, really good. But what would you say for someone who's starting out, in the world of entrepreneurship, starting out the business? Right now, there are a lot of gurus out there telling people all sorts of things, do this, do that, do this. What would you say, aside from, I know one of the things you mentioned was, looking at problems around you, but what would be the first step someone can take if they want to really walk in that entrepreneurship journey? They feel like, yeah, I have this problem, I feel like I can solve. What would, if you were, talking to yourself years and years ago, what would you advise or counsel yourself?
I would say the shortest cut to success, or the shortcut to success, the real shortcut to success is getting a mentor. Find a mentor that's full in the path that you want to go. But I think even before that, it's important to find out what your strengths are. But sometimes your mentors to also help you find out what your strengths are. So that's why sometimes just finding a mentor that's already walked the path that you want to go, it is a shortcut. It is a shortcut, right? Because they will save you years of pain, years of trial and error. You will still go through some trial and error, but they will save you a whole bunch. So getting a mentor, for me, if I was to speak myself back, a lot of things I did, I found my mentors in books and on YouTube, right? And I'll just take in, but it makes a tremendous difference. So get a mentor and then spend some time to evaluate yourself. For me, it's big. You got to know yourself. I mean, you might not know it all, but understand yourself well enough to know your strengths and your weaknesses, right? Focus on your strengths and hedge your weaknesses, right? That's for me. Focus on your strength. I'm great at problem solving. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm phenomenal at problem solving, right? When it comes to strategic planning, I'm great at those things. But when it comes to, like anything that has to do with routine, I'm not great at, like accounting, managing things, day-to-day operation. It just bores me. I love to stay excited. You know what I mean? So it's like, and for me, that's why running the fund is great for my personality, because it's like we're in these different businesses and I could just literally check up each of, I don't have to actually do the day-to-day running of those businesses. I don't do hiring, firing, I don't do accounting. They do all of those. But my job is to look at their overall operation, to find gaps, to find opportunities, to see the vision, who's running the team, and to sort of see that opportunity in terms of arbitrage, right? Where they are and where they could be. So so find knowing yourself. I mean, knowing yourself, getting a mentor. I think
that's a very, very important point you made, Osamede. The first one, which is finding a mentor and a coach. I think for me, when you're growing old, you have this kind of like, oh, I can take on the world, I can do everything. I don't need anyone to guide me. And it's this element of ego. And I think, the book Ego is the Enemy, I think is what it's called, talks about the fact that, your ego is actually what's going to stop you from reaching your potential. And finding a coach, someone who's walked that journey, is definitely the first step to like say, hey, mentor me, help me find out.
I'll tell you an example, actually. So now the COVID, so I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to learn golf. So what had happened was that I would always go with meetings, golf courses, but it was never to play golf. It was really to talk and to drink some beer. Like, you know what I mean? It's like never. But then all of a sudden I went, I met with a few guys and, I started actually, I mean, they were like, oh, you should try this out. Like, I was like, oh, this is actually like a fun game. And I decided I wanted to learn how to play golf, right? They tried to show me, boy, everyone, it wasn't the same. And then my wife decided to get me a coach. So she gave me a gift card for coaching classes. I'm telling you, bro, I kid you not. After my first class, I went back to the range, bro. I felt like a pro. Like my everything changed. Everything changed. So the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter if it's golf, doesn't matter if it's business. A coach will drag, because so before I would just think it was all about you can stand however you wanted to stand, you can hold no. The coach all of a sudden starts to explain to you that even the way you stand is important. Where the power leg is, where you're resting on, the way you hold the club, the way everything was important. But because he had done it for years, he could literally look at me and see what I'm doing wrong. It's like, okay, hold it, position yourself. Oh, okay, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to change this. If I could have kept on going to the golf course, and maybe 5 years after, 10 years after, I could have figured one or two things. But just by taking classes, getting a coach, it automatically transformed my game. I'm still learning, but I saw a drastic change, things that I would have never even thought about.
Absolutely. Right. And to even follow up with that, when we look at world-class performance, right? We look at, the Tiger Woods of the world, or we look at even soccer players. I know you and you're probably more of a soccer fan than anything else, being guys from Nigeria. Every successful guy have a coach. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal in tennis, they all have coaches. So it just shows the power of, if you want to grow. And I think, seeking out a coach is almost like you investing in yourself, right? It's like, I believe in myself so much that I will have an expert who this is everything he knows. I will have him guide me to become the best version of myself in X, Y, Z. And I think that is almost having self-respect for yourself in a way. Yes. And then the second thing I really particularly like that you talked about is doubling down on your strength, because there are two schools of thought. Some people will say, try to be a generalist in a way where, try to, you're good at stuff, but try and, be good at all the things you're not very good at and try to be best at everything. But I also agree with that school of thought is know what you're good at and just super double down on what you're good at. And of course, it doesn't mean you ignore other areas of your life, but of course, you want to really maximize what you're good at and then have people or resources or other people helping you out with areas of weaknesses. So I think that is a particularly great insight as well.
Because in my experience, I found out that when there's a problem, so I have a mentor that would say, his name is Fela Durutoye, and he says, let your name be the destination for a problem in the marketplace. Let your name be the destination for a problem in the marketplace. And when people think about a problem, they should think about David. They're like, oh, okay, that from David. because you've grown so much capacity in that field that you're the go-to guy. And that's one of the reasons I find that when I double down on my strength, is that people think about investing, people think about they want to do business in Africa, they're going to think about me. They're like, yeah, that's the guy you want to go to.
That's very interesting. And, I want to ask you a question because, part of my background also is in career consulting. Like I work with many businesses, helping them find talent. And, maybe this might not might or might not apply in the world of entrepreneurship, but usually they talk about the world is moving towards, generalist is kind of like the future of the workplace. Now, that might not necessarily apply to entrepreneurs, but what's your take on the role of someone who is a specialist versus a generalist? Like, where do you think people should weigh, maybe not in the world of entrepreneurship, I guess, or maybe that as well, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think you should try to be a specialist in something and just super narrow down where you might be excluded from other areas, but you're good at this one thing? Or should you try and like balance out your skills in a way? How do you define those relationships?
Honestly, I think it depends on what you want out of life. What kind of life do you want to live? I think I'm a firm believer that life and your journey through life is art. It's more art than science. Meaning we could both see the same picture, but we can paint it differently. It's about the flow. What do you want? What kind of life do you want to live? Right. That being said, I think in today's world, I mean, when you look at a lot of the technology going on in the world, we're talking about things like AI, talking about things like, so right now we're investing in a blockchain project in actually based out of Nigeria for Africa. And I'm telling you, like the guys who understand blockchain engineering, they are commanding the price they want to get paid. It's like they're like they're literally saying this is what I want to get paid, and people are begging to be like, okay, I'll give it to you. Why? Because they're so they're so specialized that, I mean, if you wanted that problem solved, you had to go to them. That's the problem I find with being a generalist. And again, nothing wrong with what I'm about to say, but think about it with an open mind. Don't judge me for it. It's like someone who is a call center agent. Nothing wrong with that. We need that. But we could fire you at any point in time. Why? Because the replacing you is easy. So I think the marketplace will pay you in proportion to how easy it is to replace you. And that is the one challenge I could think off the top of my head with being a generalist, is the ease of replacing you. If you have just a degree in economics and you're a teller at the bank, nothing wrong, absolutely phenomenal job. But guess what? There's 1,000, 2,000 people graduating every year with the same degree that could easily get your job. But if all of a sudden you're specialized, you have something in project management for fintechs or something, all of a sudden replacing you is a problem, because they're like, look, we can't get rid of this guy. If this guy asks for a raise, we have to give him. Why? Because the cost of replacing him is just too much. Where are we going to find another person like him? So I think that in the world, the way it's going to look at a lot of the narratives right now with things like AI, blockchain, autonomous vehicles. I mean, from finance to healthcare, the world is looking for a more specialized individual. But again, if you just want to live a regular life, that's all you care about, right? The people who say, I don't want to be a millionaire. I just want to live a regular life, have my 2 weeks vacation. If that's okay with you, then by all means, do what is important to you, right? You know what I mean? So that's sort of, I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. But I want to take it up a step notch, and then we'll talk about crypto before time's kind of going. We've been having a fantastic conversation here. But when I think about myself, for example, I approach the world in a very, very interesting way, right? So I'm a computer science grad, but while I was in university, I had the approach that university is unity in diversity, right? So for example, like I would invest in learning about physics, like I would invest in learning about microbiology, and then I would do economics, and then I would do religion studies. And I believe that when you accumulate knowledge in so many areas, which maybe was what I was referring to generalist, not necessarily someone who is just doing like a teller job, which is fine, by the way, as you said, but more so you invest in learning so much about a lot, but not as in-depth as you possibly can.
Yes, I agree with that. Oh, yeah, for sure. Because you know what? It's like part of life being art. It's like, I'm telling you, even when I look at my life experience, a lot of the things I put today, my unique twist when I maybe approach a business or I'm evaluating a business, I will find that it's things I learned from like a random. it's like nothing is truly random, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So learning a lot about everything, I think is important. Learn a little bit about physics, a little bit about biology, a little bit about chemistry, because it just makes you think about it this way. It's like being a carpenter. The more tools you have around your tool belt, the easier it is when you approach a job to do something, right? You can approach a job and be like, okay, you know what? I can use a hammer for this job. I can use a star screw, or I can use a flathead. Why? Because you have all those tools. So in that regards, absolutely. I think read about history, read about philosophy, learn a little bit about culture. Absolutely agree. Absolutely. In that context, I absolutely agree. I think even for myself in that context, I love to learn, like personally, I love history. I learn about philosophy, not because I want to become an archaeologist or something, but because I know that you'll be surprised the way you could draw from that knowledge in a different field. Because you know, a lot of times they tell you how thinking outside of the box is what most times creates the most genius solution. But in order to think outside of the box, you must have resources outside of the box. So if all you know is in the box, then how do you really think outside the box?
Can't.
You know, so I totally agree with you in that regard.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you agree with that. And I think it makes the nuance, like, especially as we're moving into, the age of technology we are in, nothing is cut and dry anymore. Like physics is mixing with biology, right? And computer science is mixing with different fields of study, and you have to be aware, not necessarily in too much detail, but of the nuances of all of the connections between these things. But let's talk about crypto a little bit. This is something you're a firm believer in. A lot of people, of course, Bitcoin has been the big noise about crypto, but why do you think that crypto and decentralized systems is the future? And I know you mentioned that our kids, this is the world they're going to live in. Can you just unpack that for me, for someone who's not like, this is just like, I'm not sure what they're talking about with crypto. Like, can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Where do we start? So good place to start. I think that we must realize that the world is constantly changing. Change is inevitable. Change is constant. We live in a dynamic world. What do I mean by saying all of these things? I'm going to take your mind back to a few, I guess, 100 years ago, when we used to have horse and buggies, right? People bought horses and they had carriages, they carried loads. I mean, it did a fantastic, phenomenal job. But there were other people like the Fords who said, hey, you know what? Maybe we can innovate and make things different, right? And all of a sudden, a few decades after, we started having vehicles. Now, I want you to remember something. The roads that were created were not created for vehicles. They were created for horse and buggies. But yet the vehicles came on the scene. Change was difficult. The roads were not meant for them. But guess what? A few decades after, today, they're still horse and buggies, but a lot of times they have been relegated. They're in the museums. They're not, the roads today are now built for cars, no longer for horse and buggies. Change. It's inevitable. It came, it changed it, transformed it. All it took was one idea. Let's fast forward. The internet, right? Look at what the internet did to mail. Back in the day, we had to mail, write a letter. Look at today, email. Right? I'm sure if you think back how much emails you've sent compared to how much emails you've sent is, astronomically different. Absolutely. Why? Change came, right? And it's funny, I tell people this, I say, look, the internet, the World Wide Web, smartphones, the way we use it, is less than 30 years old. So in 30 years, the world changed absolutely. Now, let's look back to when it first started. You can still find videos on YouTube, people making fun of the internet just because it didn't work the right way, right? It was a dial-up. You had to call. Remember AOL? It would first ring. The internet was trying to process data. It was, right? But it was trying to do it over phone lines. It was inefficient. But what happened a few decades after? Right? Like we said, the World Wide Web smartphone is less than 30 years old. But look at today. We have phones that are more powerful than supercomputers back in the day. Right? We can't even imagine what the world was like or what the world will be like without the internet. I think the blockchain is going to give us an opportunity for the evolution of money. And let's not forget this fact as well, that when we look at the richest people in the world today, right? You take your pick, top 10 richest people in the world. Tell me one person who didn't earn his wealth as a result of the rise or the birth of the internet, smartphones, the World Wide Web, the way we use it. So that one singular opportunity created generational wealth. So I think that system, that ebb and flow is happening constantly towards life. I think we're at a new sort of change or evolution when it comes to money, because you have to understand money. When we look at the history of money, and that's the thing, you have to go back. When you look at the history of money, really, money was really, I mean, back in the day, kings, it was gold, right? That's how people represented money. But remember, it wasn't just gold. We've had money. I mean, you're from Nigeria. We used to have cowries represented as money. So money has really been represented by anything if enough people agree that it is money. Number one, money is also a unit of account and a store of value. So anything that really fits this criteria, history has shown us that they can be adopted as money. Now let's look at history. Like we said, we started from gold, then we had paper that was backed by gold, and then we had paper that was backed by nothing. And that's where the problem really started, right? If you look at, I think, study history, 1971 was when, fiat really started the way it is today, where it's government decreed money. Now, the problem is with that is that because it's no longer backed by anything, it can just be created. Now, if you read the white paper for Bitcoin that was created by the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, right? His idea was simple, saying that we clearly are living in an abusive system. Why do we call it an abusive system? Now, those are not his words, it's just me paraphrasing. But the idea is that, do you think it's okay that families today are working 2, 3, 4, 5 times as hard just to earn the same standard of living that they were in 1971? Do you think that's okay?
Not at all.
But what causes that? Because every time government continues to print money, inflation kicks in. How can we measure this? I'll give you a very simple way to figure this out for yourself. Look at the price of gold in 1971 and look at the minimum wage in 1971 and divide that. So you figure how many hours did the average family have to work to earn an ounce of gold? We're using gold because gold is traditionally always been money. That was the real, fiat was really a derivative of gold, if you really think about it.
Gold standard, right?
Yeah, if you look at 2021, look at the same ounce of gold, and then look at how, based on minimum wage, how many hours is the average family having to work to earn the same ounce of gold? The ounce of gold didn't change. You realize that we're looking at something like 8 times more. So the problem is that inflation is stealing from you, stealing our buying power. That is a problem. Now the question is, how do we solve it? Right? Why do we use money? Why do we use banks? We wanted third-party intermediaries that we can trust so that I could do business with you without having to know you. What if we could create a system of accountability? Remember, we talked about money being accountability and store of value. What if we could create a system of accountability that is not reliant on a third party? That's the whole idea behind the blockchain. The blockchain really is an open ledger. It's a distributed ledger. That's really all it is. Think about it as an open Excel sheet where we could all see transactions coming in and out. But Bitcoin itself is a payment system. That allows us to send value from person A to person B without the need of a third party, because it is done through the blockchain. Now, part of the things that was pretty much predetermined in digital asset like Bitcoin was the fact that the supply was capped. So unlike dollar, where the supply is pretty much infinite, look at the debts these countries have, the US and Canada. I mean, this data is out there. The Bitcoin is capped at 21 million, right? There's a fixed amount that's produced per day. I think at the time of this recording, it's about 900 per day. It's going to keep being mined till the year 2140, so 2140 at a fixed allocation, and then it gets halved every so often. Now, the point is that because of the fixed supply, if demand increases, the only thing that's forced to happen is price will go up. So we're moving from a system, an abusive fiat system that steals your buying power with inflation, to a new money system or potential money system that actually gains value over time because of the limited supply. So that's the idea behind Bitcoin. But you start realizing that it's not just Bitcoin. Bitcoin was just the first. It's just the largest when it comes to this decentralized asset, which, like we said, is looking to pretty much do to mail, or what the internet did to mail is what Bitcoin is doing to money. But we start realizing that there's so much more we can decentralize. There's so much, because now you're looking at, every day we hear of, big companies selling our data, or I don't want to call names, like the Googles, the Facebooks. What if we could take away that power from central authorities and distribute that power, where you could truly own your own data? And if you wanted to now sell your data, you could do it in a secured way, in a way you can track. And that was the whole idea when you start looking at things like Ethereum or Polkadot or Cosmos, Terra. I mean, there's a ton of these projects. They're all solving the problem of decentralization. I mean, and it goes far and wide. I mean, let's talk about Ethereum, for example. What is Ethereum on a very plain scale? The way we have iOS, the way we have Android, the way we have these are operating system that allows developers to build on them. On a very base level, that's what Ethereum really is. It's a platform, is an infrastructure that allows developers to build blockchain-based projects, leverages smart contracts pretty much on the blockchain, or build projects on the blockchain, right? So Ethereum is like a platform that allows developers to build on, right? And we could go into things like decentralized finance. People are now rethinking the whole idea of finance. Why do we have to use the banks? How can we rethink lending and borrowing? How can we? And that's the whole idea. People are now, and again, it's just the way the internet was when late 90s, early 20s, when internet was established and people, they started going IPOs, like the Netscaps, the Amazons. There were hundreds, thousands of these companies. Not a lot of them made it. I think we have to expect the same thing of any early stage technology. So it doesn't matter if it's blockchain, same thing. Not a lot of these companies will make it, right? But our job as investors is to find the right team. Imagine if you had an opportunity to back a Jeff Bezos in 97, right? You created generational wealth for yourself, right? Imagine if you backed an Apple in the early 2000s, right? You created generational. So it's the same thing. Now there's a shift. The money is made in the shift because of the wealth transfer. There is a shift today in cryptocurrency. So I always encourage people, remember, don't be a follower, be a student. Learn about the technology, learn about what's going on, the shifting that's going on, and then learn about the teams, who they are. Because at the end of the day, if you invest in the right team, man, I mean, this is how you create generational wealth. So that's why, like I said, I once heard someone say that, because right now there's a lot of conversation. Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, but clearly we're seeing a lot of institutional adoption, right? In Canada, for one, Canada has the first Bitcoin ETF in the world. That tells you a lot about adoption, right? I mean, the States, we're having people like Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, we're having Tesla putting 1.5 billion, we're having MicroStrategy over 2 billion, we're having insurance companies. I mean, that tells you a lot about adoption, right? So sometimes you just, don't be a follower, be a student, but learn to follow the money.
Wow, man. So well explained. Thank you for breaking that down. And I believe that, this decentralized system is internet, if not 3.0, I guess 2.0 is the newest version of the internet. And if you either come aboard or you get left behind. Last thing before I let you go here, how can people find you? How can people learn more about you, your work? And, of course, you're a huge investor. How can people learn more about you if they're interested?
Sure. So for our investment firm, it's called Africa Development Capital. We are only allowed to, we only work with accredited investors. So if you're accredited investors, you can certainly reach out to us. That's the only people we serve currently, accredited investors. But for me, generally, if you want to find me, my name is Osamede Arode. Same handle on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is probably the best place to reach me. My courses are right on Instagram as well, on my bio there. I have a course that teaches people about understanding the cryptocurrency market and leveraging it to create wealth, and also the stock market, because I believe that, the stock market is the traditional market, the cryptocurrency market is the future. So I think as a student, it's important, especially, when it comes to finance, to understand both worlds and understand how they meet and how you can leverage both worlds to create wealth for yourself, to grow your wealth, and to also be able to pass that on to your generation. So Osamede Arunde is how you can find me on social media.
Sure, and I'll be, of course, posting your link as we post this episode. It's been so much pleasure, Osamede, having you on the show. I've learned so much from you. It's been such an enjoyable conversation. Almost an hour just flew by so quickly.
I know. It feels like 15 minutes. I'm like,
yeah.
I always have to check myself, because I'm like, you're saying too much. Just, it's like, there's so much I want to say. But it's like, yeah, I understand. I have to respect people's time.
Hey, man, I could listen to you for another hour here. You have the passion for teaching, and it definitely reflects in the voice. You just want to communicate your ideas, and the way you have a unique perspective on how you see the world. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share that with me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And looking forward to connecting with you and your audience in the future.
Absolutely.